Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 63 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Might be episode 63, but it's only the second time that we've broadcast from the new studios here on the outskirts of Plymouth. So we're still experimenting, so this is the first time I've actually done the show without a desk in front of me, so you have to forgive me if I spin around to get to the computer. But it's with great pleasure that I'm able to welcome Brian Gerrish as my guest tonight.
Ian, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm also enjoying the sensation of a stool, so we'll see how we get on here as we gently drift round.
That's a stool that you're sitting on, I hasten to add.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's actually something like we're episode 63, but we've been 60 episodes without you because you joined me for the very first 3 episodes of Humanity vs. Insanity, where we did 3 episodes on the reframing of police behaviour.
And how right we were, because all of the subjects we covered in that in those sessions are coming true with a vengeance, as we're going to be seeing tonight, I think.
Indeed. Well, tonight we're going to be looking at what's occurring in terms of the great EU fight. And the headlines, we have, this is really fighting talk. So here we have, now Cameron turns nasty. Well, I think there are a number of us who would suggest that he's been nasty all along. And the other side of the coin is Boris. Boris goes in for the kill. Well, here's somebody else's take on it. Boris Basher Johnson versus Dave Toffboy Cameron. But let's not be deceived by this, because they are actually the best of buddies. And if you actually put into any search engine Boris Johnson, David Cameron, you will find a whole multiple album of them together. Here they are, here they're whispering in each other's ear, sharing a glass of wine, and so it goes on. But of course they have a lot of history together because they are both Eton educated, and of course famously they are both, or were both, members of the Bullingdon Club. And when I struggled between are and were, of course once you are in the Bullingdon Club you never leave it. And the Bullingdon Club will make sure that you are very well taken care of. That's, past members who have been elevated into positions where they can ensure the guaranteed future of the young bucks. Well, of course, famously, David Cameron is alleged to have indulged in a little bit of...
Jiggery-pokery is the word.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for helping me out with the vocabulary there, Brian. And, David Cameron, of course, doing a bit of a Bill Clinton. But if David Cameron indulged in this ritual, then I think it's probably a pretty fair bet to say that Boris Johnson probably did so as well, although, of course, he's remaining very quiet on the subject.
You would surely have had to, because that's what these clubs are about, isn't it? It's about drawing people in. They're going to get up to the most gross behaviour they can, so... trashing restaurants was part of it, seeing how much money they could spend on a night, burning £50 notes, was it? I think that was one of the stories.
In front of a beggar. In
front of a beggar. So these are young men from immensely wealthy families. They're going to be paying huge tuition fees, and they are really showing that they are above other people. So the whole behaviour is contemptuous, I believe.
I think that pretty much sums it up. And although obviously the behaviour of the Bullingdon Club is open to much speculation, this film was released, I think, about 2 years ago now. This is a promo shot from the film. The film is The Riot Club, which looks at a university, a famous university, either Oxford or Cambridge, and the riotous activities, outrageously riotous activities, that I don't want to spoil the film for those of you that haven't seen it, but if you want to get an insight into the mentality of those who participate in the Bullingdon Club type social life, then I would absolutely recommend this film. And of course, it's not unique to this side of the pond, is it? Because we also have Skull and Bones.
Happening both sides of the pond. And what we've got is a network of elitist young men, principally, some women as well, but young men. And they are simply being groomed. They're then put in the positions of power.
And they've all got dirt on each other.
They've all got dirt on each other. I'm told by a gentleman who's got experience of the Jesuit system that if you go to Stonyhurst, I can't remember the other UK one, there's 2 Jesuit schools, that when you get to about 17, you are told the job you're going into. You will become a banker, you will become a barrister, whatever it is. So this is a whole network here of people being groomed, literally, to take a position of power. And I'm sure if Mike Robinson was with us, he would be reminding us that Mr. Heseltine said publicly that, of course, when David Cameron was younger, we used to call him Prime Minister. So how does that work?
Well, precisely. And, of course, if they do share the dirt, other than between themselves, then they pay a terrible price. And, of course, Michael Ashcroft was the person who revealed that David had put his appendage into the mouth of a pig. We're assuming it was dead, but we don't know for sure.
Of course.
But then literally a few days, I think it was, or weeks after his book, Call Me Dave, was published, of course, he was struck down by a mystery illness.
Indeed. And not surprising. I don't think it's surprising, because he basically threatened the heart of the establishment. This was something that could have instantly brought Cameron down. The next minute, the man is ill.
So, he did well to survive, basically.
He did well to survive. Perhaps we should also remind people that it was the Conservative chairman of Witney Conservative, so that's David Cameron's constituency. He wrote a report saying that people regarded the Conservative Party as being totally corrupt and rotten, and he was then found dead in a toilet at Glastonbury a day later.
Coincidentally.
Amazing coincidence.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, of course, Skull and Bones was like the Bullingdon Club, but Skull and Bones back in, 2005, wouldn't it have been? In 2005, in the 2004 election, and then the 2005 appointment or second term of George W. Bush. And this is a young George W. Bush and a young John Kerry. And they were both members of Skull and Bones. And any journalist that asked them to discuss their membership of Skull and Bones, they simply responded by saying, well, it's so secret, we can't tell you.
Which is the truth, ironically, isn't it? That it's a secret society, and that's where the problem starts, because what goes on in that secret society is the material by which others can blackmail them. And as Alex Thompson said on the UK column news a couple of days ago, this is the heart of the problem. Heart of the issue, the heart of the problem. These people are deliberately groomed and compromised so that they will do as they're told.
Precisely. So, this is a graphic that I used in a presentation a long time ago. I think it's from my good friend Dave Dees. 2 wings of the same bird. So the reality is it's all a charade. It doesn't matter who it is you vote for. Basically, the agenda is already established, and this is simply the pantomime to create the impression or the illusion of an element of democracy.
That's certainly true, Ian, but I think what we're seeing now is that this whole thing is coming together so quickly that any illusion of a separate agenda by the individual parties, all of that's gone out the window now. You can just see that we have an election, the party may change, but the political agenda stays the same. And what's the mainstream press trying to do at the moment? It's trying to provide the puppet show to have us believe that there is real competition between these people. And to be quite honest, I think some of it has become so farcical now. You've chosen the Daily Mail, but it could have been any of the other papers. Do people believe what they're reading anymore? I don't think they do. I think they just regard it as a game.
Well, the papers are losing circulation at a phenomenal rate of knots. I mean, in certain parts of the country now, if you try and buy a newspaper after lunchtime, you can struggle because they're just not printing the volumes that they used to print.
or they're having to stop printing altogether and come on to the internet, which interestingly brings them into our territory. So they're coming to us, is what's happening.
Well, indeed. But the Mail Online is supposedly the most widely read online newspaper on the planet.
What do you think's read? Do you think the articles are read, or do you think it's the girly stories?
Because
that's what we pointed out lunchtime today. Whatever the main headline was, down the side, soft porn, and that's the Daily Mail. Deliberate, of course.
Of course. Absolutely. Well, of course, what is occurring right now may appear to be unfolding, but in reality, it's the script. It's pure theatre. And this is actually from an article that was sent to me literally just a few days ago. It appeared in the, I believe it was in the Irish press, bordering on psychic, but it's looking at a 1941 map, which is looking at the layout of the world. And interestingly enough, and this is, of course, the year that America came into the Second World War. But what you see here is the North American Union. Everything effectively from, Panama almost, right up through to Canada and Alaska is the North American Union. And then over here we have the European Union, Germany at the time. Well, let's go to a bigger version of that. Germany at the time obviously was the opponent in the war. Here we have the Soviet Union, and here we have Europe. Now, interestingly, in this map, we have a united Ireland, interestingly, and a separate Britain. But there's another factor here as well that was part of this, and that is Hebrew land. So this is 7 years before the creation of Israel. Now, of course, we did have the Balfour Treaty in place since the end of the First World War. But here we have, basically it being scripted that Israel would be created and out of Palestine. So what we appear to have going on right now with this forthcoming referendum in just 4 months' time is the battle for Britain. But once again, Brian, this has been going on for quite some time.
Well, we can say with safety, it's gone on earlier, but we can certainly say that since the Second World War, we've seen this thing accelerate, and many people are now digging and saying that policy to form the EU has come out of the ashes of the Nazi Empire. So that is getting very interesting. But of course, things were going on back in the 30s with Dulles and the rest of his banking crowd in America. So when you see a map like that, somebody has produced that map, somebody has thought about the areas. It's not been done for fun, it's been done for a reason. But we're now seeing the continuity. So there's a plan afoot, isn't there?
Well, and as we've discussed on a previous programme, there's the Count Coudenhove-Kalergi agenda from his writings in the 1920s. And of course, the seminal book was Pan-Europa, where he actually discusses the total destruction of the sovereign nations. And actually, we'll touch on this again a bit later, but he discusses the breakdown of the nation state and the destruction of national homogeneity through mass immigration.
Through mass migration. We've got Peter Sutherland of the UN who's pushing this at the moment. So the one thing we can say, if people are talking about evidence as to what's happening, is you can follow an agenda which has gone through hundreds of years, but certainly if we take the last 100 years, you can see this agenda in place in government documents. So it's not a figment of somebody's imagination, it's real. If you want to just come back to that UK column, there we go. This is back in 2009. Gordon Brown was the man. Very nice cartoon provided for us. I think that will expand actually if you try your hand trigger, if you press it again. No, okay, all right, not to worry. But essentially, we saw that what was coming in was effectively a dictatorship. So we've got Gordon Brown goose-stepping, and it was already apparent that, yes, there was a battle going on for this nation, for Britain, because what was being implemented step by step was a new world order. So that was UK column warning in 2009. Something pretty unpleasant was on its way.
Well, in fact, a couple of years before that, Brian, I recorded a presentation not too far away from here in the church down the bottom of Totnes in Bridgetown.
Right.
And actually the presentation was about Codex Alimentarius, the global food code. But in that presentation, if we could pull that slide back, what I was discussing was the fact that the agenda was well underway for the North American Union to be established, and of course the European Union already established. But work was also underway to establish the Asia-Pacific Economic Community, the African Economic Community, and then the Sub-Saharan Economic Community, with a view to bringing them all together under a global trade banner.
Yeah.
And of course, this is now very well advanced, and we will touch on this a little bit later, with the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah, and this is key, isn't it? Because if the situation now is that we've got these vast global companies dealing budgets bigger than a national economy, immense power. So these collective groups are being driven by the globalists, the corporatists.
And the corporatists are putting enormous pressure on governments, although they don't necessarily need much pressure, to effectively privatise everything. And this is, of course, what we see in the country with the privatisation literally of everything. I mean, I saw it announced a few days ago that now the mainline train stations are going to be the next part of privatisation.
Well, you've said it all, everything is happening. Take something emotive, the NHS, we're being told that the NHS is virtually privatised now. It's just a veneer over the top of it. But everything, prisons privatised, police activities privatised, Department of Work and Pensions privatised, mental health privatised. And of course, the moment it's privatised, there is no accountability. How does the public say who is responsible, who's accountable? There is no accountability.
And that's exactly right, because freedom of information requests do not apply to private corporations. They only apply to public bodies.
Well, I'm going to qualify that a little bit, if I may, because we understand that if there's a contract which is directly giving a private company the functions of a public body, the rule is that they should still adhere to the freedom of information request, but they don't. So you're absolutely right. Effectively, the moment it's gone private, it's out of the realm of public scrutiny.
Indeed. Yeah. Indeed. Well, this is another cover from the UK column, Brown Pawns Britain, and this is another part of the agenda to effectively collapse the UK.
To collapse the UK, but I can remember this image being put together, and of course Mike Robinson was pointing out at the time that whatever the politicians are doing, the people who control the money are pulling the strings. So this little puppet show here was to give an indication to people that you may be looking at the politicians. Who we really should be looking at are the people controlling the money. And of course, what nobody wants to talk about in Parliament is the role of the Bank of International Settlements and how the global banking scam works. Nobody wants to talk about that, because those are the puppet masters.
Well, and the reality is that although a few MPs are starting to see through the scam, the vast majority have no clue.
Arrogance and ignorance are the two things that follow. There are one or two people, I think, who are being carried along. They're not guilty. They're not guilty in as much as they're not planning and actively planning it, but they're too arrogant to listen to anybody who's warning there's something nasty building.
Exactly.
And it's getting very nasty.
Yeah, I mean, some will still argue that the Bank of England is actually controlled by the government and is effectively a public body, when of course we all know that it's a private entity.
It's a private entity, yeah.
Indeed. Well, here's the concern, and this is why we absolutely need to start raising more awareness of the Transatlantic Partnership in the UK. This is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is actually ahead of the curve right now. And a number of countries in the Pacific Rim have actually signed into this. And the pressure to sign into this must be enormous, because I cannot believe for one moment that everybody in the leadership teams of these countries falls for the belief that they're going to retain any control over their sovereignty. Basically, they will become subordinate to the corporations.
That's obviously true, Ian. I think a lot about how people are cajoled and manipulated to make these things happen. Some of them are the drivers. Do they think like normal people? No, I don't think so. They've been groomed since childhood to be the future leaders, so they're pushing through a policy. But I think a lot of other people, even if their politicians are sheep, they follow it along. They want to be in with the in crowd. They want to go to the high-level meetings. They want to drink the champagne. They don't want to be left behind with the movement.
So they're like kids, basically.
They're like sheep.
Yeah.
They're like sheep. And I know a lot of people will point a finger at politicians and say they're all bad. Personally, I don't believe that. I believe that there's a significant proportion of them that are just ignorant people. And if we could get through the thick skull, probably we'd make a difference.
Indeed. Well, They certainly need to start waking up to the dangers of TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. On mainland Europe, particularly in Germany, the level of awareness is actually far greater than it is here in the UK. So it's certainly not going to be an easy ride. But now let's go back to what's going on here in the UK, because between now and June, we're going to see this mass distraction in the media in the run-up to the EU referendum. Yeah. But let me put this hypothesis to you, Brian, and then you give me your thoughts on this. It's my perception, and obviously I'm reading the scripts, I'm looking at what the long-term goals are, and I'm looking at what's going on in this country. It's not beyond the realms, in my opinion, of possibility that this country is literally being set up for a massive collapse. And what I predict is going to happen is that the media is going to focus very much on all the negatives of being part of the EU. And I think we saw this. This is, of course, one of the most significant issues.
The hot topics.
Absolutely. Yeah. 1 million more migrants are on the way. And I understand, of course, that this is a major concern because the corporatists are rubbing their hands in glee at the prospect of even more cheap labour, because they know that the migrants will accept minimum wage jobs and they will accept 0 hours contracts because they know no difference. And in fact, I was looking at a statistic just a couple of days ago where one of the supermarkets, I think it's Morrison's, but forgive me if it's not, but I'm sure they're all in the same boat. But because of the rates they pay their staff, their staff are taking something in the region of over 300,000 in tax credits per store per annum. And of course, the tax credits are being paid because basically the wages aren't enough for these people to live on. So what they're doing is they're literally calculating what's the minimum they can get away with.
And of course, they're working hand in glove with the government anyway, which is why the cosy agreement works. But you're absolutely right. First thing to say is that the immigrants are overwhelmingly victims of the system because they're coming out of countries as a result of war, largely created by the UK and the US. They are then moving...
And Israel.
They're then moving somewhere where they can get some sort of life, and they're being lured now into this country where ultimately they are going to be used as slave labour. This is the shelf stackers. It doesn't matter what colour people are, it doesn't matter where they've come from. Ultimately, this system is just going to use them as cheap labour. And we can see this starting to happen quite quickly.
And making it more and more difficult for British people or the indigenous population to find any kind of employment at all.
People get squeamish about this subject, but if you go and talk to some of the Muslim community, in particular in the Midlands, they will tell you they're extremely worried because they see their children unable to get jobs. So we're talking about common sense view between adults. It doesn't really matter your background. But what's the agenda? They want to flood the country in order to break the country down. So I'm being told that in the autumn there's going to be another massive pay cut for doctors. What's going to happen? Many qualified doctors are going to leave what remains of the NHS. Who's going to fill the jobs? People from overseas who will take on probably horrific hours for very, very low rates. And we will say the professionals of many years, they're going to leave, and some of them are going to leave the country. So by the pressure of the people coming into the country, you are going to force out the established people, whether we're white and we've been here for however long we've been here, or you've come in the last 50, 70 years, it doesn't matter. If you consider yourself an established British person, you are going to be forced out of your job by this policy. Okay. And it's deliberate.
Absolutely. So come June, we're going to see all the usual shenanigans, on the mainstream media. It's going to look as though it's coming down to the wire. And regardless of the way in which people vote, it's my opinion that the outcome will be a decision to leave the EU. But you have an interesting take on this, because the wording of the vote isn't quite as black and white as leaving the EU, is it?
Well, I'm just going to come in a slightly different angle on that, and this is new information for us. But we've been given some very good information about the analysis of EU documents going back to sort of 2013 and earlier, which is actually showing that there has been a plan to create a two-tier Europe. You're either in the main club or you're an associate member. And what we are seeing is that the real agenda is that Britain leads the associate membership. So I think we're beginning to come to your line that they want us out of the main club because we're too much trouble. We're going to be put in the second class stream, and we're going to run it. So probably we're going to see more and more propaganda to force the vote out. But even when we're out, nothing will change in the agenda because we'll simply be in this second class stream.
But for the vast majority of people, of course, will be under the impression that they are voting for a straightforward in and out. Yeah. And of course, the vote will be manipulated primarily by postal votes. And of course, the postal vote is controlled by Peter Lilly's company. Yeah. And
we've also just had to smile at that because it's all so obvious, isn't it?
It really is unbelievable, isn't it? But it's so obvious that people go, no, that can't be right. Yeah. But please look it up. And his company is iDoc.
Something, yeah.
Is the company that has the contract for postal votes, both for the forthcoming Scottish Scottish elections in May, and then the EU referendum in June. So, and what we've established is that they actually look at the postal votes first. Before they're then distributed. So they pretty much know the outcome, or they know how much to swing the outcome.
Well, perhaps we ought to have a campaign, Ian, to get the UN in here to oversee our referendum to make sure there's no bias.
Well, we are a banana republic, and that's been acknowledged. And I mean, if people actually look at vote fraud, postal vote fraud, then they will see that there was a judge in Tower Hamlets when he was referring to how postal votes had been abused in the council elections there, and he said that basically the whole postal vote system is wide open to abuse and made Britain look like a banana republic.
And of course in Birmingham you had Chief Executive Lynn Homer accused of running a banana republic with the election. Where did she then go? In charge of the border controls, which we're now told are non-existent. So you follow the people through, you follow the agenda, you can see what's going on.
And of course, there's a common denominator with all these people. They're all common purpose graduates.
A lot of them are. This is true.
Indeed. And of course, whilst they want us to come out, and that's the way the propaganda is going to be pushing people, yet they're still going to maintain the view that those who want us out basically are mentally ill in some way. And of course, this is a headline from, was it 2012? Tony Blair, anti-EU feelings, a virus.
Well, this says it all. I mean, Tony Blair, despicable man anyway. But what we've got here is that if you do not follow the government line, if you don't believe what the government's telling you, you're ill. And I think we're going to cover a few more things. Why is the attack on this country so dangerous at the moment? Because they're absolutely going for people's minds, and in particular, the minds of children.
And literally pushing this view, as we're going to see over the next few minutes, pushing this view that if you have any view that is counter to official government or scientific orthodoxy, then you are mentally ill.
You're mentally ill. And we're going to show this in a bit more detail, because the network that's been built up, it makes the Soviet Union, when Stalin was running his psychiatric gulags, what is being set up in this country makes that look like Toy Town, really.
Well, they have the added benefit, of course, today of the internet and the search engines and all the data that
and the drugs,
etc. So yeah, this is actually a slide you put together here.
We can go through some of these quite quickly, but this one is just showing who is clustered around children. So we've got Children and Young People's Mental Health Coalition, and we've got good men like Ed Miliband there. We've got a professor of social policy, but who's in the middle of it? Well, we've got Zurich. So here's your global corporatist input. What are they interested? They're interested in the minds of our children. And what are they saying? Trust all of these third sector agencies. We're looking after your children. No, they're not. They're doing the exact opposite. These are the people that if they get close to your children, they're going to be damaging your child's mind. No question of it.
Absolutely. And let's take a look at this one, because this is Theresa May at the heart of things. And of course, the other thing I want to make the observation is that Theresa May's husband, of course, is a major shareholder in G4S. And so Theresa May is pushing for the privatisation of policing. And in fact, just today, I saw an advert by G4S for evidence gatherers.
Yeah, so spying on people, basically. Yeah. Well, if we look at that network on screen, the important thing about this is it's MAPPA. This is the multi-agency public protection arrangement, where you're linking together the police, the local NHS, local mental health, local education, local probation, etc., etc. You cause a problem, you end up on their database, and they are monitoring you and tracking you. And of course, we've now got the police saying, oh, well, we don't want to deal with people who've got mental health problems. We shouldn't put them in cells. So the police are going to pass you into this MAPPA, or the multi-agency safeguarding hub, where you are going to be sectioned and locked up. At the bottom of the screen, you've got the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre. This has been operating for quite a few years now. Police directly working with psychiatrists to lift people who could be a threat to celebrities and politicians. So you express a view which upsets your local council, you start being tracked by a mental health team. And I think you have a little booklet which actually illustrates this, because of handed to people when they've come out of police.
We have, yes, absolutely. In fact, I can pull it up on screen here. Let me just pull this over here.
While you're looking for that, on screen we've got a comment by a viewer which said, of course, the Department of Work and Pension is also tied in with this network. So this is well advanced system of spying and psychiatric, inverted commas, care.
Well, I'll be talking a little bit more about this later on, but in Fracking Nightmare. But the anti-fracking campaign took a rather sinister turn in Surrey this week, when peaceful protesters were arrested by Surrey police. And these arrests are purely intimidatory arrests, because they will not stand up in a court of law. The police know this. That's why they don't put an inspector on the ground. They make sure that a sergeant is the most senior officer on the ground, so that they can say, well, he was just acting under his own authority, and we lost radio contact, so we couldn't feed from senior management. But so these people are arrested. They are charged with obstructing the highway, which of course they're not, but they're charged with obstructing the highway. But when they were released from custody, they were handed this booklet. And this booklet is First Steps, Promoting Emotional Health. And basically here is, there you go, first steps about us. And then the first section in this booklet is what is mental health. And the first paragraph says, first steps about us. First steps aim to help people find their way back to emotional well-being. The goal is to help people talk about and understand their emotions, thoughts and feelings, and make informed choices in addressing their mental health needs. And as you said earlier, Brian, I mean, this makes the Soviet Union look like a kindergarten.
Yeah.
Because here it is being spelled out that basically unless you literally toe the line, then you are going to be considered to be in emotional distress and require some assistance.
Yep.
And in fact, I mean, this happened in New Zealand a decade ago. And this is, you can search for this online. A lady by the name of Claire Swinney, she tried to organise a meeting in her community to discuss the elements of 9/11, just to talk about, what occurred on 9/11. Well, before the meeting could be held, she was sectioned. It took her family a week to get her out of the institution, and it took her a year to wean herself off the forced medication that she had been given while she was sectioned. And so, this is a very, very sinister turn of events.
It's unbelievably sinister. And here we are, 2016, we're in UK, and we're talking about this going on in our country. We're not talking about it happening in Eastern Europe. We're not talking about it happening in some faraway part of the world. We're saying that we've now got a system set up, a complex system, a pervasive system set up, where people who challenge the government are going to go into a psychiatric system to be reframed, re-educated. I wonder what the reaction of some of our viewers is tonight. Maybe some people are saying, well, this can't be true. And I will sit here and say it's absolutely true. The evidence is right in front of us. And we are now at the stage where people who challenge politicians, people who challenge Theresa May, for example, somebody then got a letter from their GP saying, come and see me. Why do you want to see me? Well, I had a letter from the Home Office. This was FTAC at work. So this is going on. UK Columns dealt with, I think it's 5 mums in total that have been put in psychiatric units for trying to do the right thing, report crime, report paedophilia is a particular one. And we also broadcast, of course, the audio of a lady in Cornwall who had been sectioned. She'd managed to make a phone call to us in which she was crying and saying they're going to forcibly medicate me. We played that out and she was released. We've got another lady called Carol. I'm waiting to catch up on the full story, but I think she's been exposing the death of Chief Constable Todd of Greater Manchester Police. And she was picked up and sectioned again recently, released a couple of days ago, but has now disappeared again. This is Britain now, people being sectioned, forcibly medicated because you disagree with the government.
Now, if you're watching this episode of Humanity versus Insanity, you are most probably part of the 3% of the population that the establishment is absolutely scared of. They're running very, very scared, which is why it is that they're starting to put in these type of control systems.
Absolutely.
So the onus is on that 3%. 96% of the population, unfortunately, it's not a question that they don't care. For whatever reason, their lives are such that they're so wrapped up in whatever it is that they're doing that they're not going to have the time, even if they have the inclination, to look at this. So the onus on determining the direction this country takes over the next few years is very much on that 3%. Now, 3% of the population is 2 million people, and 2 million people can make an enormous difference. But they do have to get involved. They do have to find a way in which they can make sure that we are bringing about the changes that we need to see, rather than continue down this slippery totalitarian slope.
You're absolutely right, Ian. And one of the things I keep saying is the exposure is the weapon. Getting out into the wider public what's really going on, that's very important. But you cannot just do it by sitting in front of a computer and emailing. You've got to be talking to people. You've got to make it real. Once the information starts to move, you see the establishment getting very, very nervous. That's why I think the lady in Cornwall was released, because they saw the public beginning to home in on her plight. We've had another lady in Liverpool who was picked up, disappeared into a police station. There were so many calls, it closed the police call centre down. I think we'll name the lady, it was Maureen Spallach. And in the morning, the policeman said to her, "You've got a lot of friends, love." And what that showed is that when the public stood up and made the effort, called the police station, those policemen, I think some of them would have been very frightened. You imagine you're on duty in a police station, suddenly the call centre closes because several thousand people have called it. You wonder what's going to happen to you when you walk out the door to go off duty. Now, nobody's threatening violence. All they're doing is saying, we can see what you're doing. But there are too many people at the moment who think their contribution to stopping this immensely serious situation is, I've sent a few emails this morning, usually to people who already understand what's going on. So people have got to get through the fear barrier, because this is a frightening subject. If you say somebody's going to accuse you of being mentally ill, that could be a bit scary. You've got to get through it. You've got to be working with other people, and you've got to become properly active. And we've seen what being active with the fracking community has achieved. Well, immense things.
And it can achieve enormous things. But and nonetheless, there is still the trauma and the drama to work through. I mean, people have seen obviously we have the drama at Exeter Airport just before Christmas. But we know we're having impact when you're getting more flack than usual. I mean, I think the RAF used to say that you're over the target, when you start to get more flack. And, the vitriolic trolls are out there. I mean, right now, I have one particular troll who, on one hand, accuses me of still working for the oil industry. On another hand, suggests that I'm not even Ian R Crane, I'm somebody else. And, all of these absurd allegations, totally without any foundation, generally based on something that they've read somewhere or heard somewhere that have been put out to try to undermine what we do. And of course, once we start to get these attacks, we know we're having impact. We know that we are pushing the right buttons.
Definitely pushing the right button. But the other thing is, for us or for other people who are active, to stay away from those sorts of people, because
absolutely
they literally drain energy. They're not achieving anything. It's one thing to fight the establishment, at least you know who you're dealing with, but people who claim to be standing up against people being sectioned or murdered in police stations, they claim to do it, but actually they spend their time undermining good work. So don't waste your time on that.
Don't feed the trolls.
I've got an eye on the clock, Ian. I wonder whether we could just show the slide of that wonderful lady MP in Wales. I think it's last but one out of my section. Here she is. Many people say, what can we do? One of the things we want to say to you is, if you prepare your case well, if you have credible, clear evidence, it is possible to get politicians to respond. And here is Bethan Jenkins from Plaid Cymru in Wales, and she has supported a family by means of the fact that she has given the correct evidence about the case. And she's already been pressurised by the police. She's already been pressurised by the Labour Party in Wales, but she's prepared to stand up and be counted because somebody has done the work and given her the evidence. So I'm going to say it's not all bad, and well done to this lady.
Absolutely, and I have had some experience with MPs in the north of England, and I have to say there's some very, very good people up there, some really determined people, but we do need to make contact with them and work with them.
And be professional.
And be professional, absolutely. Brian, we're going to close in a second. I just want to make a brief announcement about AV7. but which unfortunately you're not going to be able to.
I am, excuse me, I'm committed elsewhere. I'm really sad, Ian. I would like to be there. The time is right because there's so much happening. On this occasion, I can't be. I could. It depends whether I get let into America this time.
Yes, indeed.
We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, well, AB7's coming up in May, the middle weekend in May, Friday the 13th through to Monday the 16th. I will be updating the website with the speakers this weekend. A quick rundown of the confirmed speakers. And much of this is by popular request because AV events are unique because they are social events. It's the speakers, the delegates, everybody together for the whole weekend, and not just for the presentations, but through all the meals and in the evening. So we have Patrick Henningsen, Max Egan, Thomas Sheridan, Field McConnell coming over from the US to talk about his thoughts on the Malaysian airline flights. A wonderful lady by the name of Vanessa Beeley, who will be familiar, of course, to UK column viewers, who will be talking about the fraud of the NGOs working particularly in the Middle East. Zen Gardner, back again by absolute popular demand. Willem Felderhoff down in the bottom right-hand corner there, a KLM pilot. He's been on 2 previous episodes of Humanity vs. Insanity talking about geoengineering and weather manipulation. A new face to the AV circuit, Michael Shrimpton, a QC, or I think maybe former QC now, but recently spent some time in as a guest of Her Majesty for sharing his insights as to what was being planned at the London Olympics. And he's got some very, very interesting information to share with us at AV. And again, by popular request, Dr. Graham Downing giving us an update on vaccines, cancer, and the big pharma agenda to shut down all natural healthcare and, well, anything that's effective, basically. So the website for it is alternativeview.co.uk or my website, ianrcrane.com. Brian, thanks very much for joining us, and well, hopefully you'll be at AV8.
Well, thank you for this evening. Hopefully I will. I'm sure I will be. Yeah.
Thanks very much, and thanks for joining us this evening. And for regular viewers, I'll be back in 45 minutes with Fracking Nightmare.